Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a big topic that's been at the center of modern British history. The UK's relationship with the European Union before Brexit. Now, Brexit was a defining moment in 2016, but the story didn't start there. To really understand it, we have to go back decades to the aftermath of World War II. So, let's take a closer look at how the UK's relationship with Europe evolved over time, leading up to that dramatic vote in 2016. Our story begins in the years after World War II, when Europe was shattered both physically and economically. The devastation had left countries looking for a way to rebuild, but also to prevent future wars. So in the late 1940s and early 1950s, the idea of closer European cooperation began to take root. One of the first steps was the creation of the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951, which brought together France, West Germany, Italy, and the Benelux countries to coordinate their coal and steel production. It was a small, practical step, but it had a much larger goal: to make another war between these countries, particularly France and Germany, not merely unthinkable, but materially impossible, as one of its architects put it. But where was the UK in all of this? Britain, under Prime Minister Clement Attlee, chose to sit this one out. The UK was focused on its empire, the Commonwealth, and its relationship with the United States, so there wasn't much interest in joining what seemed to be a European project. Fast forward to the late 1950s, and things were starting to change. Europe's economies were growing rapidly, and Britain's, wasn't doing as well. The success of the European Economic Community, or the EEC, what we might call the forerunner of the EU, was becoming hard to ignore. In 1961, under Prime Minister Harold Macmillan, the UK applied to join the EEC. But the process wasn't smooth. France, under President Charles de Gaulle, blocked Britain's entry not once, but twice. De Gaulle believed that Britain wasn't fully committed to European integration and, more importantly, that its close ties to the United States made it a poor fit for the European community. He was also concerned that Britain's entry would shift the balance of power within the EEC towards more American influence. So Britain was kept on the outside, looking in. It wasn't until 1973, after de Gaulle had left power, that the UK finally joined the EEC under Conservative Prime Minister Edward Heath. But as we'll see, even from the start, this was a relationship full of tensions. Even after joining the EEC, the UK's relationship with Europe was anything but settled. Just 2 years later, in 1975, the country held its first referendum on whether to stay in the EEC. And yes, you heard that right, the first vote on Europe wasn't in 2016, it was actually in 1975. Now, the Labour Party, which was in power under Prime Minister Harold Wilson, was deeply divided over the issue of European membership. Some factions of the party, particularly on the left, argued that the EEC's rules were harming British industry and workers. Others, however, believed that staying in the EEC was crucial for Britain's economic future. The campaign itself was intense. Prominent figures like Margaret Thatcher, who at the time was the leader of the Conservative Party, campaigned to remain in the EEC. And ultimately, 67% of voters chose to stay. But even with that strong result, there were clear signs that the UK's relationship with Europe would remain a divisive issue. Let's fast forward to the 1980s, the Thatcher Era. Margaret Thatcher's approach to Europe was complicated, to say the least. On one hand, Thatcher supported the creation of the single market, which was designed to remove barriers to trade and allow for the free movement of goods, services, capital, and people across Europe. In fact, she signed the 1986 Single European Act, which helped pave the way for this. But Thatcher was also a fierce opponent of deeper political integration. One of her most famous moments came in 1988 during a speech in Brugge in Belgium, where she made it clear that she did not want Britain to be part of a European superstate. She said, and I quote, "We have not successfully rolled back the frontiers of the state in Britain only to see them reimposed at a European level." So, while Thatcher believed in the economic benefits of Europe, she fiercely guarded Britain's sovereignty. This was a theme that would continue to shape the UK's relationship with Europe for years to come. Moving into the 1990s, the tension between economic cooperation and political sovereignty became even more pronounced with the signing of the Maastricht Treaty in 1992. The Maastricht Treaty formally created the European Union and introduced the idea of a single currency, the euro. The UK, under Prime Minister John Major, managed to secure several key opt-outs, most notably the decision not to join the Eurozone. This was a major win for British Eurosceptics, who were increasingly vocal about their opposition to further integration with Europe. But the Maastricht Treaty also sparked a growing divide within the Conservative Party. Euroscepticism, which had been simmering for decades, really started to gain momentum during this period. Many in Britain were concerned about the loss of national sovereignty, while others still saw Europe as vital to Britain's economic future. When Tony Blair came to power in 1997, there was a noticeable shift in the UK's approach to Europe. Blair was much more pro-European than his predecessors, and he pushed for the UK to play a more active role in shaping EU policies. However, even though Blair was supportive of Europe, his government decided not to join the euro, a decision that was influenced by both economic and political factors. By the early 2000s, the Eurozone was becoming more integrated, but the UK remained on the outside, continuing its strategy of being part of the EU while keeping its distance from certain key projects. By the 2010s, the stage was set for the next major chapter in this story. Growing dissatisfaction with Europe, concerns over immigration, and the belief that Brussels had too much power over British law all contributed to the rise of Euroscepticism in mainstream politics. In 2013, under pressure from the growing influence of UKIP and the Eurosceptic wing of his own Conservative Party, Prime Minister David Cameron promised a referendum on Britain's EU membership. He hoped that renegotiating Britain's terms within the EU would be enough to satisfy Eurosceptic demands, but we all know how that turned out. And that's where we'll leave it for today. By the time we reached 2016, the debate over Europe was new. It had been building for decades. The UK's relationship with the EU was always complicated, marked by economic cooperation, but deep political tension. And so there you have it, a deep dive into the UK's relationship with the European Union before Brexit. I hope this helped shed some light on how complex relationship and this relationship evolved over time. And if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Do you think the UK's departure from the EU was inevitable given the history we just went through? Well, just let me know your thoughts on this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one right here in the end screen.